the Maitland Stateroom of the Mount Lavinia Hotel, where we are bringing you yet another episode of the Sri Lankan Understanding. I'm Shanuki Dialvis, and I do this program through the lens of women's histories. And today, I have an episode that I wanted to actually bring to you. And I think when you say the Sri Lankan Understanding, it is as Sri Lankan as it gets. So I am the great-granddaughter of an Ayurvedic practitioner, two actually, both of them were. And I've known about the practice of traditional indigenous medicine pretty much all my life, but not really understood it. And then very recently, just by chance for a lark, I attended a workshop on what I found was called hi.lk, which I found very intriguing and interesting, and I wanted to know what is this. And I found it to be completely fascinating, and knowledge that I didn't even know that Sri Lankans had within them, a wisdom that has been passed down through the ages. And I was blown away by this knowledge, and I thought more of us need to know this. And I was privileged enough to meet my guest at today's episode, Dr. Mansha, who is a traditional medicine practitioner, and she was the doctor who kind of facilitated the workshop, and within a few hours just made me so interested in this subject and to understand more about what is this Sri Lankan wisdom and this indigenous medicine that we have been practicing for centuries, and so many of us in today's day and age know nothing about. So this is why Dr. Mansha is on the show today. Thank you very much for being here. Dr. Mansha, if I can just get straight off to it, I was fascinated to have a female practitioner talking to me about hi.lk. Can you tell me about your journey in this practice? How did you come across it, and why do you practice it?
So thank you very much, Ms. Shanuki. So I'm really happy to be here today on this program. So once again, thank you very much. So let me begin with something like this. I would say, yes, I've been a Sri Lankan. So from my childhood, I've seen healing begins with either your inner body. So these are few things that we've seen from our household or wherever we went. So something like that, I would simply say it has been there with us from birth as Sri Lankans. And if I tell you a bit about my journey, so it was because of my advanced level examinations, getting selected to university, and this was the process where I got into the field of Ayurveda basically. Okay. So I must say that I'm an Ayurveda doctor, graduated from University of Colombo, Faculty of Indigenous Medicine, and it was a 5-year degree program with a 1-year internship. So Deshiya Chikitsa, or traditional medicine, has been one of the major academic years when it came to our degree program. And when it comes to this, I must describe a little bit about what we have learned. When it comes to the 5-year degree program, we usually call it the Bachelor of Ayurveda Medicine and Surgery. So there, indigenous medicine is one of the academic years. And I also must say that we also learn about Ayurveda, traditional medicine, and certain aspects of Western medicine as well. So it's kind of a blend of all these three that we have learned throughout all these 5 years.
So what is hi.lk then?
I'm coming to the point. Thank you, Ms. Shanuki. Yes. So hi.lk means the traditional medicine which has been in Sri Lanka ever since human beings were here. So it is, I would say simply, it is the Hela is the Sri Lankan, Vedakama is the medicine, and whatever the Sri Lankan kind of medicine in Sri Lanka, we call it as hi.lk. And as Sri Lankans, we and I am privileged to talk about this here today.
So yes. Is it very different from Ayurveda?
Okay, I must tell you that when it comes to Ayurveda, it came to Sri Lanka from North India specifically.
Yeah.
So it begins from the era of rishis, and that was how it was introduced to Sri Lanka. And it was Pulasti Rishi who went for the conference. We call it the Rishi conference at the Himalayas, and that is the history about the introduction of Ayurveda to Sri Lanka. And I need to add a little bit more into it, Ms. Shanuki. So whatever exists in Sri Lanka as traditional medicine at present is kind of a mosaic of systems, a mosaic of different systems of medicine, including whatever existed in Sri Lanka, the Ayurveda from North India, the Siddha kind of medicine from South India, and the Unani system from simply Middle East. So it is kind of a mosaic which exists at present. So we also call it the Sri Lankan Ayurveda sometimes. So I'm giving you all these names so that anybody could understand what Hela Vedakama means. So there are, traditional practitioners who've been coming from, inherited a lineage, but when it comes from my side, I'm an Ayurveda doctor, passionate about Hela Vedakama, and when I got into this field, it was then I realized how these herbs work wonders. So it was that, I was so lucky to get into this field and to voyage in it, and that was when I got to know this miraculous science of healing.
Miraculous. I consider it a little bit, I kind of aspire to, not aspire, but what's the word, I prefer using traditional indigenous medicine to Western allopathic medicine. And I'm very intrigued about how women are practicing this in Sri Lanka, and in terms of practitioners and in terms of within the homes, how mothers and grandmothers are kind of using this knowledge. Sometimes they might not even know that they're using Hela Vedakam sort of science in the household. Can you talk me a little through how are women, or how have women contributed to this science, and have women always been a part of this indigenous craft in Sri Lanka?
Yes, Shanuki, you came to a very nice point, yes. So that I would say we have heard the name Vedahamine sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So Veda Mahatya, Vedahamine, these have been so common in our societies. So these Vedahamine, with the advancement of knowledge, time and everything, have now become the doctor or the physician, or I would simply say it's kind of the development which we experience now. Getting to the back, the Vedahamine era, I would say, yes, they were the major characters in the household, taking care of the family, taking care of the kitchen, especially. I would simply call it the kitchen department, not actually simply the kitchen. So it was the kitchen where healing began, I would simply say, starting from the simplest Tunapaha. I'm using these words because we are used to it. The Tunapaha, the Kottamalli. So these are, the simplest but the most effective medicinal things that we've been using since, ever since they got to know, or ever since a girl, right, got into the kitchen, they would use all these kind of herbs, spices, all this in their kitchen setup usually. So I would say that is the initial go. That was the initial go. So whenever somebody in the family got ill, maybe a cough or simply a cold or a fever, they would never rely on something external or foreign. They would simply get into the kitchen to see if they could find something. If not, they would step outside and see into the garden whether they could find at least a simple plant. And I must tell you another small thing. I don't know from where they derived this knowledge. They really had a deep knowledge about plants. So they knew, I mean, the medicinal properties of each and every part of the plant. If we just consider a plant of kottamalli, they would take the root, the stem, the leaves, and
the seed.
The seed, and when it comes to the seed, the raw form and also the dried form. So they knew everything. It's kind of an inherited knowledge they had from their past. But what I see at the present is kind of like that knowledge kind of has got diminished, maybe with, I mean, the foreign things that we have got used to.
Yeah.
It's kind of like fading away, but I would say that even when it comes to the modern societies, now there is a big, I mean, like inclination towards the coming back
to
traditional medicine.
And how wonderful it is that women are the custodians of healing and have been in Sri Lanka with so much, as you said, traditional, inherited, ancient wisdom that, you know, we really need to tap into more. More about this when we come back after this break. Welcome back to this deeply fascinating conversation about Sri Lankan Helavedakam and how women have been custodians and practitioners of this indigenous knowledge, whether we know it or not. And I want to talk about women specifically in Helavedakam. For instance, one of the criticisms that I have about allopathic Western medication is sometimes they just don't understand women's bodies, and medicine is kind of generally distributed to men and women without understanding how our bodies work specifically and how our hormones change and all. So Dr. Mansha, can you tell me a little bit about when it comes to traditional medicine and Helavedakam, are there specific unique, is there specific unique women's knowledge on things like, you know, childbirth or, you know, menopause or the reproductive system, and, you know, what are their unique treatments that we have specifically for women?
Okay, Ms. Shanuki, that's really a very fine point. So I'll come into it from the puberty, because when it comes to a girl or a female, she undergoes different episodes in her life, simply. So starting from the major point, puberty, so it's something really common among, I mean, the society, the Sri Lankans. So when it comes to puberty, they would have ceremonies, they would have different cultural, I mean, events. There's bathing, sort of like flower bathing, and all this, I mean, very fine but interesting things, I mean, traditional things. So this is where the women's health begin in, I mean, I won't say in Helavedakama, but when it comes to the society, this is where, I mean, specifically women's health begins. I mean, just for an example, puberty.
Yeah.
Right. Stepping slowly into other episodes like the menstrual cycle, I would say. It is the puberty where it begins, and then the cycle, and then slowly into a marriage, and then into a childbirth. So we as Sri Lankans, we know that we have a very rich traditional background. So even when it comes to a porva, right, when it comes to a marriage. So I'm simply telling you a background of these, and I'm just simply taking you all through a few, I mean, these points. Yeah. So if we just think of the menstrual cycle of women, so it is something which is similar to the cycle of the lunar month. I would say the sun, or sorry, the moon's voyage, I would simply say. Okay, so beginning from there, Helavedakama, or the traditional medicine, or whatever the traditional knowledge we have inherited, they would simply talk about your behaviors, you're bathing, and I always would point out in my other workshops as well, always Helavedakama or traditional medicine, or even our ancestors or our grannies, they would simply say don't have bath at this time, don't do this. That's how they would come up with. But when it comes to a justification in the modern science, I would simply say yes, they do have a very scientific background. So with your body thermostat and maybe your blood vessel constrictions, I'm just trying to tell you the scientific background behind even these simple techniques which they have introduced. And when it comes to the point that you asked, Ms. Shanuki, how Helavedakama uniquely talks about a female, I would say I can talk about this for years with you, Ms. Shanuki. Yeah. It's kind of a vast thing, but just to summarize all that, to tell you precisely about that, I would say when it comes to Helavedakama, I already told you about the puberty, and you know, when it comes to a childbirth, so sometimes the grannies, they would say, okay, why not you have some kolakanda in the morning. I'm starting with the simplest routine, right, which begins from the kitchen. So the kolakanda, and even when it comes to, they always would say the whole cold patent seed plants, the hot patent seed plants, and they will simply say Ushna Deval, don't take. And how these things come into the practice, the Ushna, Shita, all these, though they seem to be so simple, they have a very scientific base. And when it comes to childbirth, those days they used to have these Vinnabumata, they had specific personnels for those things. They had this Timbirigeya, they had a very rich setup of, they used to have kind of like different setups with, we used to grind flour, right? These kind of things, that is what we come up with. They used to have all these in the Timbirigeya setup, or we usually call it the labor room at present. So even with a simple action of I would say this pitikotanama, that's how we say milling something, they would say it's it's just to give a pressure, right? So it is done in several other ways when it comes to the present context. So it has been really nice to see these kind of simple things with a heavy scientific background, specifically catering for the women's body. Yeah. And specifically they would also say about these when it comes to childbirth and looking after children. So starting from the meals when it comes to a childbirth, and after a childbirth we would say a postpartum care. And Shanuki, you might be knowing that there had been a practice, like after 7 months they would take the pregnant lady to their home, to stay with their parents and all. So it has been a very fine traditional setup. And it is the trimester, or the final trimester is something that we consider as a very crucial stage where she needs rest, where she needs support from everybody. So when it comes to Helavedakama or traditional medicine, I would say, though it is so very much complicated, our ancestors have made it a part of their own routine, and that is why we use tunapaha even now in our curries. So that's without even understanding why we use it. So yes.
All right, we're going to take another short break, and we'll be back with the final segment of this episode. Welcome back to an understanding of Sri Lankan Helavedakam and how it's been working in our lives sometimes completely unnoticed. Dr. Mansha, I want to talk about the future of this science and this craft of indigenous medicine. Do you find that in the industry there is enough equal recognition for women who practice it? And how do we actually expand this and make more women take this craft up, or at least show an interest in learning? Because everybody wants to be the doctor, but when it comes to traditional medicine, understanding it, valuing it, really acknowledging its incredible magical powers, you know, to see it as a worthwhile professional career to pursue. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So when it comes to that point, Shanuki, I would say when it comes to Sri Lanka, there are different kinds of practitioners. So as I told, I introduced myself as an Ayurveda doctor, and we've been learning part of it, the traditional medicine as part of it. So when it comes to other traditional practitioners, I would say whoever comes from lineage, and we usually call them the traditional practitioners, not the Ayurvedic practitioners. So it is basically the academic setup that we do have in Sri Lanka. But I won't say that anybody is restricted to learn or know about it, but I think it is something lacking. I mean, even when it comes to you or anybody who is not in the field, they'll have to just scroll through the screens and then get to know about these. Or sometimes the access for the, I mean like the books or the authentics would not be there sometimes. So what comes to my mind is, at this point, when it comes to the academic setup, it is the universities and the educational institutions. It is where you could get this basic knowledge, Ms. Shanuki. And apart from that, I would simply say, if you go to a Veda Mahatya and tell them that, okay, I need to know about this, and that you are passionate about it, yes, they might really help you just to know about it and learn about it. And we have heard, I mean, like from our past, so whenever somebody was interested towards this wisdom or the knowledge, the family members or parents or anybody, they would just take that, the student or the child or whoever it is to the practitioner and introduce him to him. And that is how I think this practitioner gives that knowledge, and he would see whether he is a good, simply a disciple, whether he is a good student, whether he has the capacity to learn this. And it was another great science, knowing the person and then giving them the knowledge they had.
How do we preserve this science? Because if it's getting lost in time, and even if the plant, the agriculture of the plants, the process and the sort of the knowledge behind the harvesting and the creation of medicine treatments and stuff like that, if it's fading, but there is such value to this, how do we preserve it, especially as women, because we are the healers, right?
Yeah. So Ms. Shanuki, I would add something into it as well. So I must tell you, there's a good research sector in Sri Lanka at this moment. Simply, when it comes to herbs, you told how we could preserve it. Actually, to preserve it, you have to learn it. That is one way, and you have to love the science. That is that is number two. And when it comes to preserving, and especially women, they have to keep it, they have to be in the practice. They have to start it from the kitchen itself, I would simply say. And simply gardening in the sense, now we are more towards horticulture, doing planting ornamental plants, and why not we give it a try with a herb,
medicinal plants,
with a medicinal plant. And when it comes to preserving, I would simply say we have to, practice it to preserve it. So if you just, if we just deviate from the practice, it fades away. So I would simply say, when it comes to the present context, people are much more inclined towards herbs, and they are more kind of like keen on how these herbs work, and then for what purposes we could use this. And Ms. Shanuki, don't you think like we are going a little bit, to the back? Like we are stepping to the back, and then because with the knowledge that we do have at present, people get to know about, any other kind of medical practices, and also the traditional wisdom that we do have. So people always think about the good effects and the bad effects of whatever the herbs we use, and also the other kind of medicines that we do practice. And I would also tell you, Ms. Shanuki, that when it comes to a preservation of a practice or whatever medicines or anything, you must feel what you're doing. And as I always say, healing begins within. So why not we give a try with whatever we do have indigenous to ourselves. And also when it comes to the medical practices, we have a knowledge, we have a better education than what our ancestors had, and we know that when it comes to different setups like allopathy or the Western medical field and the traditional fields, we always have to have a balance between these two, not to criticize anything. When you do not criticize and when you accept something in a good way, I think even your tradition or your customs would also get preserved. If you try to criticize something and then override something, it is there, where the fall begins.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And unfortunately, we've run out of time. When I met Dr. Mansha the first time, I think we spent around 3.5 hours together, and it just wasn't enough. And of course, this is a vast vat of knowledge that I was eager to share just a tiny little intro snippet of with Sri Lanka, hoping that it will encourage you to maybe read up more. Helavedakam and traditional medicine is a lot more about treating the root of your system rather than treating a symptom of an illness, and it is a long-term wellness craft. And I have completely sort of converted after listening to Dr. Mansha at that workshop, and I would encourage you to look into it a little bit more, because this is something intrinsically, I don't know what that word is, Sri Lankan. And thank you for joining the Sri Lankan Understanding today. We'll be back with more.